Hello and welcome back to the Paddock. It has officially been a whole year since we started Paddock Girls Podcast. And we wanted to take a quick second to just thank everybody who's been joining us in the Paddock every episode and following us along on this journey. So we've got a special one today, and that is our DTS review. While we may not be film critics, we definitely have some thoughts on Drive to Survive as a series, and especially their most recent season, Season 6.
Yeah, so before we go into season 6, let's talk about some of our favorite and memorable moments in the past seasons.
Now, I know everybody remembers last season where they basically kind of constantly were smacking us in the face with Joe's crash in pretty much every single episode for season 5. It was just like put in here and there. Even when it didn't necessarily make sense, it was still there. They love to find a big dramatic moment and kind of just like tease it out every episode. And sometimes I love it and sometimes I really hate it.
Yeah, it was covered like 3 episodes on like that one incident, and it was just like so dragged out. Like they kept on like showing like what happened, and that was it. It's like, okay, like enough already. But what really killed me the most was that they only talked to Joe like one time about it. And that was it. And it's like, it happened to him. Like, why are we still talking about it if you guys aren't even talking to the person that was in the car? Like, hello. But I do love the dramatic feel that they added to Checo's scene last season too, finding out the news on Seb retiring in the 2022 season. His reaction literally embodied all of our own reactions.
Yeah, him saying Seb has Instagram lives in my head rent free. It's like one of the funniest things from the season. I love it, and he was everyone in that moment.
Sometimes Seb just gives you a line that's just so iconic and so applicable to everybody, and that was just his moment in last season. I was really excited to see who was going to be involved from season 5 again for season 6 and who was not going to want to do it again, because I feel like that's one of the most interesting things about DTS is like which drivers and which teams are going to actually like say, sure, we'll have you in the garage. Like they have the right to say, yeah, no, I don't want to do this. I'm gonna wash my hands of this and we're just gonna not have me involved. So I always like to see who shows back up.
Yeah, I definitely wonder like how they negotiate that, because I think it was Mercedes didn't appear like the first few seasons, and then there was a like time period where like Max wasn't in a few seasons too. So yeah, I can imagine it takes a lot of convincing, especially the ones that probably don't like the limelight too much or more camera shy or whatever the case may be. But what I really like about DTS, when I was like a new fan of the sports, just like learning about the teams and their drivers and kind of like learning behind the scenes, like little details and everything, kind of like being like, oh, this is what goes on, like just beyond the race weekend and who wins and whatnot. It was kind of like a nice like introduction.
Yeah, I think it's always interesting to see kind of the behind the scenes of like, activities and everything that's off the track. So, like they'll visit, drivers' homes or like when they're on vacation or doing like an activity they like. And it's kind of a new side that you get to see that you wouldn't see if you just, watch the races. So I think that's kind of an interesting part of DTS.
I mean, I think we all remember we've seen Charles on his yacht with the family. You always get those like little scenes of Carlos in Mallorca with the family. Like I think that is one of the big draws of DTS is it just makes them feel a little bit more like real people, which I mean, obviously they're real people, but it makes them feel a little bit more close to normal. They'll never be completely normal. I mean, these are some of the best athletes in their sport and make an obscene amount of money. So they're not that normal, just period. But it's just really cool to see a different side to everybody. Now, I think we need to start jumping into season 6 because I just feel like DTS production really didn't mess around with at least episode 1, I got to give him a 10 out of 10 for the Fiat Jolly footage within the first like literal 30 seconds of episode 1, because as we literally just said, we all love off-season footage of these drivers, and it just was great. They gave us Lando in the Jolly. We had Lance snowboarding, and I have a line from him that I think I need to just steal. I need to figure out how I'm going to use it or what it's going to describe, but that is sugar for the soul. I just think that that is a really cute phrase, and we got off-season Max as the Red Bull girly. Obviously, I loved that because it was just like Max having fun and not being competitive, which I feel like everyone kind of forgets that, like, out of the car, he's a really nice kid, honestly, at least what it seems like.
I always love the off-season footage because they look like they're having like so much fun and like they're relaxed and like not stressed about a race or training. And like you had mentioned, Amy, it's just like a sneak peek into their very private lives. Of course, they have their own thing going on and everything, but it's nice to see like their like side quests that they do and who they hang out with and like who knows who and all that stuff, or like who's friends off the grid, like in actual friends instead of just like, you know, colleagues. So it's always like nice to see stuff like that.
I will say I feel like this season gave us a lot of paddle content, and I feel like we're going to get a lot more paddle content from the drivers moving forward. I mean, we also have seen it on social media, but the one scene for me that stressed me out like nobody's business in the first episode was the Aston Martin event scene. And maybe that's just me as somebody who like worked events in a past career, but it gave me so much anxiety, just all of the tension. It felt very over the top, but I'm also like, it's a stroll party. It doesn't surprise me, but that scene just stressed me out. I don't know why they decided to put it in, because I don't feel like it necessarily added anything super important to DTS. I feel like they could have cut some more of it out, but that was a production choice, obviously.
I mean, I think they kind of left that bit in just to kind of show like Lawrence Stroll is basically a Bond villain, and you know, like this is whole the whole event was very like you can see that event like in a James Bond movie. You know, Mr. Stroll doesn't need a wristband, like the whole thing leading up to it, and like even, you know, Lance and Fernando looked like well-dressed henchmen. Like Aston Martin's also tied to like James Bond, so there's that too. But I think it was more of just to like give like a vibe of the team and kind of like what he wants to do with the team. Like they're serious and they're not just like the leftovers of Force India. Like they're their own thing now. But I honestly hope that whenever like the next James Bond movie comes out, that like maybe we could see a partnership with the F1 team, because Aston Martin is like a part of that franchise. So that would be really fun.
I would love that. I'm a massive James Bond fan. But I would love to see like a cameo from the guys somehow. Like, I don't know, Chuck Fernando Alonso in it just for fun. Make him just drive past, just do some donuts in a vintage Aston. I don't know. Have fun with it. But I feel like for me, episode 1 really sold me on the concept of Fernando actually like taking on a different role within Aston Martin as a team. Obviously now we know that he's around for at least another 2 years with the team. But I just feel like we got to see how Fernando really takes on this mentorship role. And I feel like the first episode for me kind of set me up on this concept of like him taking on a more leadership role within the team in the future, even when he decides to stop racing. I, in some ways, could see him staying with Aston Martin in some kind of like advisory role, whether that's like Jenson Button with Williams or like Niki Lauda and Mercedes. I don't know what that role would look like, but it just kind of like planted that seed in my head.
Yeah, he seems genuinely happy with the team and what they're doing and all the progress they've been making. And I think he's really trying to like set up like a legacy with Aston Martin. for after he stops driving, like you mentioned. And like I could see him even like kind of going into more of a managerial role because he's proven that like he's also pretty good at that side of things. Like he has his own like driver management now, and he's also just been in F1 since the beginning of time, so he just knows a lot. And he's like Flavio Briatore's protege, so like I can see him maybe moving into more of like a managerial role later. But I think he'll always be there in some form. And he's been practically adopted into the Stroll family at this point, which is kind of nice to see. Like, it really is kind of like a family atmosphere on that team.
If he doesn't become team principal, I can see him being like managers of like the drivers coming into the sport and everything like that, and being like that mentor, which I actually loved seeing that with between him and Lance. Kind of made me like Fernando a little bit more because I was just like, okay, you're not like that bad of a guy, but of course everything was like dramatized like beforehand, so like of like what I've seen in other DTS seasons where it's like okay, but it was nice to see how that relationship had like blossomed, and it was like beneficial for not only the team, but I felt like it helped with like Lance's driving a bit too. I will just never forget Fernando complimenting Lance's like driving like mid race when he saw like the move on the screen, so he was like, tell Lance good job. So it's nice to see that, but I definitely see Fernando in some shape or form still being involved in the sport once he's done driving, and it would be pretty cool to see him continue it with Aston Martin and like him investing into that and all. So I would like to see it.
Now, I'm pretty sure that like everybody and their mom had this on their bingo card that Netflix was going to absolutely go to town on Lance's injury, like within at least the first 2 episodes of DTS. Obviously, we got it very early on. I mean, they have to cover it. It was a big thing. But can we please get drivers to stop biking like a week and a half before the season's supposed to start? Like, I just feel like it's a really bad idea. At least the Aston boys need to stay away from bikes before preseason next year. Like, no biking for you. Not allowed. Absolutely not. Keep it to a stationary bike, treadmill, elliptical, go for a hike, and even then be freaking careful. Like, no bikes for the Aston boys. Absolutely not. No longer allowed.
You know, those DTS producers were working overtime once they heard the news and were like, quick, let's go. Let's talk to like Lawrence. Let's talk to Lance. Let's see what's going on. Let's see what we can get covered. Like, you know, they were working overtime.
Yeah, I mean, like, and some of the footage, like, that showed, like, basically Lance was in incredible pain, and he still managed to get, like, P6 after all of that. Like, Checo was like, are you okay? Like, in the, back areas, I guess. And, like, I just can't even imagine, driving, like, at those speeds and basically having horrible pain in your wrists. It's crazy. But I loved what Netflix's choice to basically, they were at the car launch, I think, and Lance was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go biking in Spain. And then like, dramatic cut to like his dad sitting down and being like, well, there was an accident. Perfect cinematography right there. But I mean, you can see that like Lawrence Stroll definitely cares a lot about his son. So always good to see, fathers caring about their kids.
Yeah, I definitely enjoy that. I think he even said that he's a father first before like CEO or whatever he is to the team. I forgot. But I thought that was nice because like I feel like people always talk about their relationship, but it's like at the end of the day, like he is a dad and that is his son. Like that's a normal like human fatherly reaction. But it was really nice to see like Casey has said, like the dramatic cut where it's like, yeah, so he got hurt pretty bad. Like it just fit perfectly like that.
And of course they have their like little photo shoot before the season starts with everyone by their cars. And Alex was just going first team for the shots, last team on the track, which was peak Alex. I mean, because they were early for the photos, but I know knowing Williams' history, they had a, they didn't really have much to look forward to, but they made the most of it that season. But Alex just kept going because I think he heard about Lance's injury and he's like, maybe, we aren't meant for two wheels, just four.
One thing I love that DTS always gives us is a different side to the team principals. And I feel like this season just made me love Fred Visser even more than I already do. I just like feel like he's someone I want to grab a drink with. Like, he just feels so unbothered and so goofy. But I just feel like we got peak unbothered Fred in season 6, and I love it. I really hope we get some more because I just think it's really funny. This next little moment will probably only land with a few specific people if you're a musical fan, and that is the ex-wives of Red Bull, because it was really giving Six the Musical for me. And it just makes me laugh every time we get like the ex-wives of Red Bull. There are just so many. The list goes on. Everybody has their own opinions. But Red Bull's gonna Red Bull, and I love that DTS just kind of really gives us the honest, like, how things went down. Was it a little savage? Absolutely. Was I surprised? No, it's Red Bull. Shouldn't surprise anybody at this point.
Yeah, honestly, it sounds like Netflix should hire Alex to direct season 7, because his description of how Netflix was going to cut the whole, Nick's out, Danny's in drama was pretty spot on. Like, he got that pretty accurate, which I thought was pretty funny. But then I kind of it was interesting seeing, all that footage about Nick and everything, because I felt so long ago that happened. Because it was about halfway through the season, and I just felt so bad because he looked so awkward at that little Red Bull charity event that he was late to, and then they had his happy little cleaning montage where he was cleaning his apartment, and especially as the viewer, what's gonna happen to him, and you just kind of feel bad for him. And also that shot in Monaco, I think they were on the boat, and Nick's just talking about the race and everything. And Adrian Newey looks like he would rather be anywhere else in the world. And Checo is like, why did you stick me on babysitting duty? But it was just an interesting dynamic, I guess, they have with all of the Red Bull and then their junior team.
I do have to say, it really does look like Checo is kind of like, why do I have to babysit the youngin'? Does it have to be me? You couldn't have put the duchies together? But, I mean, it is what it is, I guess. I don't fully understand why they put Max, or why they put Checo and Nick together with Newey on a boat. It just feels like a very interesting mix of team personnel together. But it is what it is. I will say, while Alexander Albon can definitely cause some DTS production cut choices, Lando Norris will give us comedic relief, and his comment while driving a golf cart and saying that it's quicker than their car is just, I need that on a t-shirt, please. Complete with golf cart. I'm sorry, it's so accurate, it hurts. But it doesn't surprise me that Lando is going to be the person who will make fun of his own team and their lack of pace.
If they make merch of it, they should put the McLaren livery on the golf cart. It would make perfect sense. But I love when people on the show just make jokes about the pace of the car compared to other objects, in this case with Lando, the golf cart, or Claire, I think it was Claire Williams, I think that's her name, when she compared the pace of the Williams to a horse, and that was iconic because I didn't know anything about that. I was like, ooh, that's rough. But it's funny when they throw that banter, because it's at least they're aware and can make a joke out of it, bring some light to it.
And it wasn't just Lando providing the comedic relief with McLaren. Oscar was also pretty funny. I loved the part where it was super, super early in the morning and they were getting ready for one of their, season launch events. And poor Oscar, he the doors just don't open. He's just stuck outside the MTC and the sliding doors aren't open. He does the awkward little wave you do, when the automatic doors aren't opening. And I think everyone felt for that moment, because I think that's happened to everyone. But it was just a funny little, tidbit. I feel like McLaren always has a bit more of the funny anecdotes and funny things that happens to them throughout the season. Maybe that's because of the drivers or just the atmosphere of the team. But there's always, some fun little thing with McLaren. And then honestly forgot how bad McLaren started off because they made such an improvement throughout the season. And I think DTS did a pretty good job of highlighting kind of that jump that they made from the struggle at the beginning where both cars were barely working in Bahrain. And then kind of that high point in Silverstone where Lando got a podium. And it was just incredible the work that the team put in to make improvements like during the season, not just over winter break, but actually like during while they're competing. And then it was really funny to see Zach being like, let's go see my boy, and then doing the awkward like dad running over to the podium in Silverstone.
Now, I have recently been entering my Lando Norris era. It feels weird. I'm not sure how to feel about this. I'm still processing it. But watching him struggle in that McLaren at the start of the season, still like watching DTS season 6 back recently in preparation for this episode, like hurt me physically. I just want to see him in a car with some freaking pace. We are getting that currently, but the start of that season just really hurt to watch for McLaren. And I'm not even a McLaren fan.
Yeah, I think whenever like a driver kind of overcomes like they're in a horrible car, you want them to see them do better. And so I think it was really exciting. Like everyone was kind of rooting for Lando at that point because like the car was just so bad, and they hoped, it's a historic team, like there has to be some hope in there. And so like I remember watching Silverstone, I was on like with the shitty airplane Wi-Fi, I was being so excited for Lando, but also have to be quiet because like you're on an airplane. But even just getting second, I mean, especially with last year with Max winning everything, like that was a huge accomplishment. So always fun to watch.
Yeah, I'll never forget the roaring cheers from the crowd during Silverstone when he was leading after the first turn. I literally had chills. And same as Amy, I'm also entering my Lando era, still processing as well. So I'm always like low-key cheering on for him whenever I see him like in that top like 3. I'm like, come on. I'm like, let's get you a win. So I'm really hoping that will happen. It's manifesting it for you, Lando. Like, we need to make it happen.
And then they went from the McLaren episode to kind of, I guess, some of the underdog teams with Haas and Williams. And I thought it was interesting the kind of juxtaposition that they had between Gunther and then James Vowles as team principals, because they definitely go at it in 2 very different ways. Gunther is just very loud, very chaotic, while James is just very quiet and calculated. And you can definitely tell he's an engineer, like especially with his little, tangent on caffeine and how much you should have and all of that. But I thought it was just an interesting way to see like 2 different ways to run a team. And then, of course, it's not a, DTS season if you don't have Mattia and Gunther doing their little fun adventure somewhere in the Italian countryside. This time it was at Mattia's vineyard, I believe.
It was definitely Mattia's place in Italy. I really, really, I am begging, manifesting this on a vision board, like the whole 9 yards. I need Netflix to give Mattia and Gunther a show, like now. Even if it's 5 episodes a season, just please, like, guys, give us the goods. You know that every single F1 fan would absolutely tune in, or at least every single DTS fan would tune in to watch those 2. Just, like, goof off for the summer. Like, make it, like, heck, it could be 3 episodes every summer. Just give me them being goofy and funny. But I will add on to that of a request for a Toto and Fred miniseries of some form, because I need it. I love the little team principal friendship dynamics, and I feel like we don't get enough of it, but I feel like we need to get a whole lot more of it. So like, give me a little spinoff series, please, and thank you, Netflix.
We do love a good spinoff series, and we do know it'll probably hit, knowing the fan base that we are and how unhinged we are too. But I forgot what episode this was on, but the way they showed the 2 Alpines crash into each other and go into the barricade, and then you cut to like the drivers going into the safety car, which by the way must have been really awkward in there. Like I never realized that. Like I was just like, oh, they had to go back to the garage together, not in that awkward little scooter Vespa thing that they usually go on. So just I can just see how that was. I can just imagine the French banter between the two. And then after that, it was just a straight cut to the Belgian Grand Prix with the news of Otmar leaving, and I feel like it was the whole thing was just awkward. It was just a whole awkward season for the team in general.
Yeah, Alpine was kind of a dumpster fire last year. They had like high highs and low lows. Like it was everywhere and anything in between. I remember like there were all of the memes of Esteban and Pierre basically being the only employees left at Alpine. Like they were training how to do their own pit stops because everyone was just leaving left and right. But I don't really know why we had two Alpine episodes. I feel like it maybe could have been, put into one and we explore a different team. But I mean, and there definitely is a rivalry between Ocon and Gasly, but I feel like maybe it was a bit overhyped because I think they're older now. Like they know how to be colleagues. They're not gonna like kill each other immediately, and they kind of awkwardly get along, probably because they're just both French. But it's always funny to see how Ocon is just like seems like such a nice, guy, and then as soon as like he's on track, he's an absolute terror to any teammate he has.
Now, here's the thing that I feel like I always need to think about with these two is the fact that Frenchmen always hold grudges, at least in my experience. And it just feels so on brand for both Pierre and Esty. To be really honest, I feel like they're the two French guys who are like holding grudges with people and like muttering in French under their breath. Like that just feels like something they would do. But I do have to say, I feel like Esteban will never have a teammate that he gets along with. But in retrospect with that, I feel like Pierre will never get along with a teammate the way that he got along with Yuki. And I just feel like a lot of fans are putting this pressure on Pierre and Esty to like be friends, and it's just never going to happen. You're never going to get Pierre with a teammate like Yuki again unless you get Pierre and Yuki back together or you give him a different teammate. But he is definitely never going to get along with Esteban Ocon like that. It's just, it does not feel like that is in the cards. Sorry, not sorry. For me, I have to say one of my favorite, more, I guess, like personal moments is Toto and Susie and Jack in the off season. And Jack literally looks to Susie and goes, "I'm going to crash you off the track." As they're like heading to a karting session, and just like the amount of sass that little human has is next level. I am not surprised at all in the amount of sass, but it just makes me giggle that you have the audacity to sass a woman like Susie Wolf like that. But I mean, it's his mom. Every kid's gonna sass their parent. It's unavoidable, but it just makes me giggle every time I watch it.
Yeah, I think he definitely takes after Susie, like on track and off the track, because, she's a great driver herself. So who knows, maybe we'll see him, move up the karting and Formula ladder. But he looked so tiny in that little cart. I was like, he's going so fast, but he's so small.
And speaking of Wolf, that contract talk between Toto Wolf and Lewis was so tense. I felt like I could feel the tension between them jumping out the screen. It really just gives like a foreshadowing of what was to come before the current season. I just really wish they had listened to Lewis's insights on what should go into the car. Again, the man knows his stuff. He is a 7-time world champion. There is a reason he's this successful. He knows what he's talking about. So it's like, all right, come on now. Like, why don't you guys listen? But that's my opinion. But yeah, super tense. And I don't know. It's just interesting. Like, of course, they only show us so much of what goes on. But I always wonder what happens, like, when the cameras are not around and how they communicate. If it's, like, as somewhat calm like that. Maybe not, but who knows?
Yeah, during that video that they shot in Stuttgart, you could tell that like Lewis was kind of fed up with everything. Like he just wanted to drive the car, and at one point he just like peels off, and the staff is just like sadly going, "Please come back." And I think that's really kind of foreshadowing for Lewis leaving the team. He's just going off. But DTS also had a Ferrari episode. And I thought it was funny that they showed basically an edit of Charles as a saint while talking about Ferrari is basically a religion in Italy and elsewhere. And, everyone was holding their breath when the Ferraris were fighting in Monza. I think that was pretty kind of tense with the two getting at it. But the kind of let's get along lunch afterwards with Fred kind of felt like a parent being like, okay, you two, you had your argument. Now time to get along, eat your pasta. But then we kind of moved back into like the Danny's big return saga, which obviously came to a bit of a halt after his crash in Zandvoort where he broke his hand. But Liam did really, really well as a substitute. He did amazing. It was great that his family got to go see him race in Singapore. And his dynamic with Yuki is great as well. They get along really great and their banter is pretty funny. And weren't they roommates back when Yuki lived in England?
They were. There's a part in like one of the earlier seasons where you see like Yuki packing up his belongings at the flat or apartment that they lived in, and like Liam's like standing there like kind of like commenting on like I think it was like the tidiness or something about like the way Yuki was and like maintained his stuff. Like Liam's just like, you can tell he's like relieved that he's gonna have some like organization again in his life.
And then of course they had an episode about Vegas, the big spectacle that it was. My favorite part was when they were talking kind of about the getting ready for the pre-ceremony event that they were doing. That was like the Hunger Games ceremony up on their little podiums. And they were like talking about, oh, what you can do up there. And Max just goes, can we hide? And that was perfect. I think that exemplifies how he felt about that situation perfectly.
I don't blame him for feeling that way because it can be like pretty overstimulating. Like Vegas is a lot already, but as everyone had mentioned when the weekend was going on, it definitely gave Hunger Games, which was cringe, but at the same time, like, what do we expect from Vegas in general? So, but speaking of Vegas, seeing Carlos go over that pothole again, yeah, that was rough. And just hearing his reaction over the radio, I think helps just people understand how severe the damage was, not only to the car but to himself and the pain that he had endured like afterwards, because I remember like people were saying like his like legs were tingling and like the risks that he could have faced if it was worse. So I think that kind of helped kind of make people understand that a bit more.
Yeah, it was crazy that something so small could cause so much damage. And it was a new track for everyone as well, and it was very slippery, which kind of added an additional struggle. But it was great. I think it was a great race that we saw. And especially we had a great battle between Charles and Max and then Charles and Checo. And despite basically every other aspect of Vegas being a bit of a mess, the racing itself, I think, was pretty good. And, as a summary of, I guess, of the season, I just wish they could have mentioned more about Max's accomplishments last year and all of the records he broke and everything he did. Like, yeah, he had a good car, but, only Max could have kind of done what he did. 10 wins in a row, breaking Seb's record, and basically winning almost every race is maybe, I think, something they should have like celebrated or talked about more. Like, they didn't even really talk about him winning the championship. It's just kind of like, oh yeah, he did it again. But I think that would have been nice to at least have some kind of acknowledgement.
Now, while we could talk about season 6 for ages because there's just so much good content, I think it's fun to kind of predict what we think we're going to see for season 7, which was just renewed. Personally, for me, I think it's kind of obvious that they're absolutely going to milk any content that they have between Carlos and Charles or Carlos and Ferrari, given the whole Lewis move. It's going to be in there. The same thing kind of goes for anything that they have involving Horner and any Red Bull issues, any comments, if they're legally allowed to put it in or if they're willing to put it in. But I feel like even with some of the issues with Adrian Newey, I feel like there's just some things that they can include for any potential Red Bull drama that's currently occurring. I feel like season 7 is going to be an interesting one given what we know so far has gone on this season.
And speaking of Ferrari, I just want to know how they'll touch on Lewis switching teams and joining them for the 2025 season? Just like in general, how like all of that went down, the reactions from not only all the F1 drivers, but the team themselves, like the engineers, like all the crew and everything. Like, it would be kind of like nice to see their reactions just because we know the energy that Lewis brings and all that stuff. So I can just see people fanboying, but curious if they will.
Yeah, I feel like there's just so much that happened before the racing even started this year. And I think they might, I don't know if they're going to have like a whole just silly season episode because so many contracts are up this year. And we have like a lot of rookies kind of on the sideline. Like Ollie made his debut this year. So like, he obviously proved that he can make it in F1 too. And then you have Liam as well. So they want to try and get on the grid. And then we already have like Nico moving to Sauber, which displaced one of the Sauber boys. And Carlos still doesn't have a seat as of this point, too. So, like, I think there's just a lot of reshuffling and moving around that's going to go on. So I wonder how they're going to, like, cover all of that.
I've said it before. I will say it again. Murder boards and red string is literally the only way you are going to be able to get through what this silly season is about to turn into. I will actually be on the frickin' floor if they get a lot of the Nui drama into season 7 because I feel like it's just going to be intense, to say the least. I do feel like if I'm going to make an actual prediction, I feel like we might get some Haas and Andretti drama somehow. I just feel like it would be a missed opportunity not to include it, assuming that they have footage of like the meeting to potentially bring in Andretti. I feel like there's probably going to be some comments from Haas. I don't know. I feel like that potentially could be something that's brewing. I just feel like with so many drivers having contracts that are up, that it's just going to be really crazy. We already all know that silly season is going to be beyond mad, and I don't know how they're going to lay it out, but I feel like I'm going to need a notepad and a pen to be able to keep it all straight, even being able to watch it happen in real time.
I think it would be cool. Netflix, DTS people, listen closely. See if you could get some inside information on what's going to happen in Miami this weekend. Because there's rumors that Andretti is apparently going to meet with the FIA, I believe, or it might be someone else within that realm, to talk about joining F1. And it would be cool to get the kind of behind the scenes. And plus, please let the damn team join. Like, please.
I mean, there's nothing Netflix likes more than drama, and this whole Andretti trying to join the grid is full of drama. And I think especially if they actually do make it on the grid for 2026 or whatever, if that's confirmed sometime this year, I think they'll definitely have an episode on that because, like, that's a new team joining the grid that hasn't happened since DTS has started. So I think that would be like a cool episode if they could maybe get some behind the scenes of like, Mario and Michael Andretti, like what they're working on and everything like that if they do end up making it onto the grid. I think that could be something cool to see.
And thinking about next season, I'm curious to know if there's going to be any news about Gunther leaving Haas right before the start of the current season. Again, I know producers were probably going wild with all the off-season stuff going on. But in general, I just hope to see more of the underdog drivers. Or more so the drivers that don't get much airtime on DTS. I know there's like the negotiations and all that contract and stuff. But like drivers like Logan or like Joe, like people like them, like I feel like they would gain so much more fans, especially like, for example, Logan. He could get such a fan base from the US if we saw him a little bit more and got to know him a little bit better.
And I think especially after the year that he's had so far, I feel like they might touch on the whole kind of Williams disaster class of Australia where they didn't have an extra chassis and then Alex crashed his car. So Logan actually had to give up his car for Alex, even though he wasn't the one that crashed. Or the fact that Williams is basically one Excel sheet away from falling apart at times. I think that might be something that we might hear about because it's definitely, we don't really know what's going on at Williams. So it might be interesting to see, if Netflix can maybe get us some behind the scenes on all that.
And to close out the episode, we have a quote from Will Buxton for you. It's not even bringing a knife to a gunfight. they are bringing the spoon. The disappointment was so apparent.
And that's another season of Drive to Survive complete. I hope you enjoyed our episode, even half as much as you enjoyed all 6 seasons of the show. Let us know your favorite moment of season 6 on our socials. Everywhere we are at Paddock Girls Podcast, except Twitter or X. There we are at Paddock Girls Pod. Thanks for joining us in the paddock today. We'll see you after Miami. Bye.
Bye.